Namaskar friends, welcome to the channel JIV and CIV Made Simple. This is our MSME unit number 1 theory portion and we are going to introduce our MSME. The topic name is Introduction to MSME. So let's get started. So first of all, let's rewind a bit. Okay, so before mid 2020, the MSME definition was frankly a headache. It was built entirely around investment. It was built, entirely based solely on the investment. And worst part is that, it discriminated based on what you did. If you were a manufacturer buying heavy machinery, you had one set of limit. If you were a service provider buying equipment, your limit were much lower. It was very confusing and honestly, it penalized business for upgrading their technology. Yes, it penalized the business because you can see these limit have been given. So we need no longer to remember it just for understanding what was the flaw in the old classification. I'm just telling you. So basically plant and machinery 25 lakh, service 10 lakh, right? Similarly a small, again manufacturing and services, you can see the limits have been provided. So if you were a service provider buying an equipment, your limit were much lower. It was very confusing and it penalized business for upgrading their technology. But then 2020 happened. The government realized that they needed a system that actually help business grow, attract investment, create job without the fear of losing their MSME status. So they tore up the old rule book. They erased the line between the manufacturing and services. Everyone is now on a level playing field. So what was the line between the manufacturing and services has been eroded, right? Everyone is on a level playing field. And instead of just looking at what a business spend, that is investment, they introduce a composite criteria. The key word here is the composite criteria. Okay. So now they look at what a business spend plus what it earned, that is investment plus turnover. When we talk about investment, so what a business spend, and when we talk about the turnover, it means what it earned. So as spending plus earning both combined, it become a composite criteria, right? So how do you remember the new limit? Here is your forever memory hack for the exam. You don't need to memorize a giant table of 6 different digit number. You only need to remember these two rules, these two things. The first is called 110-50 ladder. The first is called 110-50 ladder, and the second is called 5x rule. What we call it 5x rule. Okay, think of three MSME level: micro, small, and medium. These are the three level: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Okay, so you can think of them as a ladder for investment. If you look at the step number 1, that is micro, 1 crore. Step number 2 is small, 10 crore. Step number 3, medium, that is 50 crore. That is your investment ladder 1, 10, 50. Okay, now for turnover, you apply the 5x rule. I told you now, you need to apply the two rule: 1, 10, 50 ladder and 5x rule. How to apply it? See, the government expect your turnover to be roughly 5 times your investment limit. So that's why this 1 crore multiplied by 5 become 5 crore. 10 crore multiplied by 5 will be 50 crore. 50 crore multiplied by 5 250 crore. That's it. So 110 50 for investment multiplied by 5 for turnover. So if you write that on the corner of your scratch pad during the examination, you will never get an MSME question wrong because this question is tested every time, right? So now there is one beautiful golden ticket hidden in this new rule that you must know. And what is that golden ticket? Let me explain. Imagine that you are an MSME and you start selling globally. Suppose you are MSME and you have started selling globally. The government want you to bring in foreign currency. So to reward you, they completely exclude your export turnover from those limits. Very important. So export turnover is completely excluded from the MSME limit. This is the kind of reward that you get. So you could export hundred of crore and it won't push you out of the MSME bracket. It is a massive relief for export. So friends, imagine that you are an MSME and you start selling globally. The government want you to bring in foreign currency. So to reward you, they completely exclude your export turnover from this limit. You could export hundred of crore and it won't push you out of the MSME bracket. It is a massive relief for the exporter. Finally, you know what they did? They digitalized the whole clunky paperwork process. As of June 1st, 2020, this is the data. They launched a single purely online passport for MSME, and that is called Udyam registration. Right? The word is Udyam registration. right? So it is a mandatory for new and existing unit, and it lives on one simple portal. So let's log these before you take your next sip of coffee. These are your punchy takeaway, that the big shift that we move from investment only to investment plus turnover composite criteria. And then comes the great equalizer. Manufacturing and services are not treated exactly like the same. Then I told you to remember 110-50 ladder. So micro 1 crore, small 10 crore, medium 50 crore, and turnover is just 5 times. So micro 5, small 50, and medium 250. Then we talk about the golden ticket, that export turnover is 100% excluded from your limit, right? Export turnover is 100% excluded from the limit. And then we talk about the digital passport. So Udyam registration is the mandatory online ID for all the units. Now, friends, so if you are getting, now we are talking about the MSME classification rules and calculation. So let's talk about the how the government actually looks at the business today. First, think of the business like a family. Yes, you can think of the business like a family. Okay. So the government does not care how many different branches or GST number a company has. Under the single enterprise rule, there is something called, single enterprise rule, as you can see it here. Under the single enterprise rule, if they all share one PAN card, they are just one family. All GSTIN under a single PAN are aggregated, which means they are one family, right? All their investment, all their turnover get bundled together. You can't split your business into three pieces just to stay in a lower MSME bracket. Very, very important thing. I'm telling you that you cannot split your business into three pieces. So what I mean to say, suppose this is a business and you split into B1, B2, and B3. You can't do that. In order to stay in the lower MSME bracket, you cannot split your business into three pieces. So the question is, how do they calculate what you are worth? So, automation is the name of the game now. Everything is auto linked through your ITR, CGST, GSTIN. Everything is interlinked, right? To all these things. So, since March 2021, PAN and GSTIN are strictly mandatory, right? What were made mandatory? PAN and GSTIN. Okay, that was made mandatory since March 2021. So no more manual self declaration unless you are a brand new entity, and even then the grace period only lasts until your first 31st March, right? So so only for a new entity there was a chance of there was a provision of promoter self declaration which was valid till March 31st of the first ITR year. And in every other cases you have to provide your PAN number as well as the GSTIN. Okay. So when they ask you to calculate your investment, when they calculate your investment, they are not looking at your fancy office. They completely exclude land, building, as you can see, right? So what they exclude while computing the investment? So tangible assets are excluded. It exclude land, building, furniture, and fittings. They only care about the core engine. And what is the core engine? The core engine is the plant, machinery, and the equipment. These are the core engine. They only care about the core engine, like plant, machinery, and equipment. And here is the favorite trick question that RBI love to ask: that do they look at what you paid for that machinery 5 years ago? Tell me, do they look at what you paid for the machinery 5 years ago? No, they only look at the written down value at the end of the financial year, right? They strictly use the written down value at the financial year end, not the original cost. And what about the turnover? Yes. So that was all the part about investment linked directly to the previous year ITR based on the promoter self declaration if it is a new unit. And the tangible asset exclude land, building, furniture, and fitting. And I told you that Udyam registration, they strictly use WDV at the financial year end, not original cost. Now, for the limit, if we talk about the calculation of turnover, right? Just remember the golden rule of MSME, that government love export, and any money you make from exporting goods and service is strictly excluded from your turnover limit. Very important. Any money that you earn from exporting goods and service are strictly excluded from the turnover calculation. Okay. They want you bringing foreign money in, and they won't penalize your MSME status for doing it. Yes, they want you bringing foreign money and they won't penalize you. Right now, for the limit, this is where people panic, but this is where you are going to sign. I told you the forever memory trick to remember. right? So I told you to remember this. I think earlier this was the earlier limit. Earlier limit we just talked about. This was the earlier limit, right? Which was in the June 2020. Then now this is the revised limit, and we have to follow this one. This was in the budget 25-26, and we have to follow this one. That is 25-26. So how do you remember? Your new starting point for the micro investment is now 2.5 crore, right? And to find the small, what we need to do? Multiply it by that 10. So 2.5 multiplied by 10 will be 25. Okay, and then so your investment ladder is simply 2.5, then 25, and then 125. So what we did, first of all, we started with 2.5, we multiplied it with 5, we got 25. Sorry, we multiplied it with 10, right? We got 25, and then further we multiply with 5, we got 125. So what is the how does the ladder look like? The ladder look like 2.5, 25, and then 125. This is how the ladder look like. Now, what about the turnover? Yes, very good question. Apply the 4x multiplier. Just apply the 4x multiplier. So just see, let me erase all these things, and then you can easily appreciate how to get to the turnover. Just apply the 4x multiplier. And I request you to remember this only, because this is the new limit, right? This is the new rule. Just multiply by 4. 2.5 multiplied by 4, 10. 25 multiplied by 400. 125 multiplied by 4, 500. Right. I hope this is crystal clear. How do we compute the revised limits for micro, small, and medium? Right. Now, friends, the hot air balloon rule. How does the company change category based on this composite limit? Yes, very good question. How does the composite change category based on this composite limit? Think of the business as a hot air balloon. This is an example through which you can understand. You can think of the business like, hot air balloon. Okay. So to go up, suppose you want to go up, okay, or you want to upgrade, you just need one blast of hot air. What you need? You just need one blast of hot air. If the business crosses either the investment ceiling or the turnover ceiling, boom, they are pushed up to the next category. See, very important thing I'm telling you. You can think of them like a hot air balloon. So they will move upward, right? So to go up or to upgrade, you just need one blast of hot air. If the business crosses either of the ceiling, whether investment ceiling or turnover ceiling, right? They are pushed to the next category. And to come down, two possibilities are there. Either you go up or you come down. That is called, downgrade. Suppose you want to downgrade. It is much harder to fall. The balloon only descend if you lose both burner. If you lose both burner, then only balloon descend. Both your investment and turnover must fall below the ceiling simultaneously to be downgraded. Again, I am repeating, to go up, you can see upward trigger. To go up, you just need one blast of hot air. If the business crosses either the investment ceiling or the turnover ceiling, then they are pushed to the next category. And to go down, both burner, if you lose both burner, then you will go down. Both your investment and turnover must fall below the ceiling simultaneously, then you will go down. For upward, if you cross either ceiling, you will go upward. For downward, you have to cross both the ceiling, miss both the ceiling. And if you did and suppose if you did pushed up, the government is nice about it. They give you 3-year grace period. This is a very important thing. They give you 3-year grace period from the date of the change, where you get to keep all your previous non-tax benefits. It is like keeping your old club membership for a few years after you move out of the neighborhood. So friends, let's lock all these in before our cup is empty. The single rule I told you, one PAN, one enterprise, all GST IN are combined. I told you, right? One PAN, one enterprise. Just remember, single PAN, one enterprise. This is the first rule we have discussed. Then we talked about the limit, right? Limit. I told you how to remember this. So start with 2.5, multiply by 4. So this 2.5, this you can see micro, small, and medium. Okay. And then we write about investment and turnover. So just write 2.5, multiply it with 4. You will get, multiply it with 10. You will get 25. Multiply with 5, you get 125. And multiply it with 4, you get 10. multiply it with 4 you get 100, multiply it with 4 you get 500, and all these values are in crore. Then we talk about the investment calculation. I told you that written down value method is to be used, exclude land, building, furniture, and is auto linked to your ITR. And then we talked about turnover calculation. I told you that export are 100% excluded, and PAN and GSTIN are mandatory. Export turnover is excluded, PAN GSTIN is mandatory. Then we talk about the balloon rule. I told you that upgrade if you cross either limit, downgrade only if you fall below both limit. And then finally we talk about the grace period, that upward reclassified from previous non-tax benefit for exactly 3 years. Now friends, let's have a look at the next concept. So friends, let's look at the big picture first. Why does the RBI and the government care so much about MSME? According to the NSS 73rd round, let's have a look at this. This is the big picture. According to the NSS 73rd round, there are over 633 lakh of these unincorporated business across India. How much? 633.8 lakh unincorporated MSME across India. So this is the data of the NSS. 73rd round. There are over 633 lakh of these unincorporated business across India, split almost perfectly down the middle between rural and urban area. But here is the mind blowing part. When you picture an MSME, you might picture a mid-sized factory, isn't it? You might picture a mid-sized factory. In reality, over 99% of them are micro units. 99% of them are micro units, and a small unit make just half a percent, and medium one are very tiny, 0.01%. That tells you the segment domination. Micro are 99%. Together, these business have created over 11.10 crore job, right, total. So mostly in the trade and manufacturing. They are not just a part of the economy, they are absolute backbone of the economy. Because they are so vital, the government gives them a golden ticket, and that golden ticket is what we call something udyam, udyam registration certificate. Yeah, that golden ticket that the government provide them is called udyam registration certificate. As you can see, they have mentioned here. So it mandates them under the MSMED Act of 2006. Once a business has this online ID, banks love them. Why? Because any compliant loan given to MSME automatically qualifies at the priority sector loan. So suppose there is an MSME and they are having this Udyam certificate, right? They are having this Udyam certificate. So the bank, they love giving them loan. Why they love giving them loan? Because it qualified under PSL, priority sector lending. Even factoring transaction done through the TRDS platform, they count also toward this. Any kind of factoring transaction you can do, you do through the TRDS are PSL eligible, and this already I told you PSL eligible. This is a very important point to note. TRDS, trade receivable discounting system. So basically, and if the bank lend to the khadi and village industry sector, it perfectly hit their 7.5% sub target for the micro enterprise. Yes, suppose bank lend to KVI sector, right? So lending to KVI sector already falls under the 7.5% sub target for the micro enterprise. But what happened when a business grow or shrink? Yeah, what happened when the business grow or when the business shrink? So basically, to remember how the basically this is where examiner love to trick you with the reclassification dates, and that is what we are going to discuss right now. So here is your favorite memory hack for the exam to remember how reclassification works. I want to you to visualize two things. The first thing I want you to visualize is the VIP launch, and the second thing I want you to visualize is the parachute. Imagine that your business grow and you graduate to a higher category. You graduate to a higher category, isn't it? That's called, upward graduation. Do you immediately lose your lower tier perk? Tell me. Do you immediately lose your lower tier perk? No. The government put you in the VIP launch. The government put you in the VIP launch. You get to retain your present status and all the benefit for exactly 1 full year after the close of your registration. Yeah. So present status is retained for 1 year after the close of the registration year. Right. They give you time to celebrate your growth without yanking the rug out from under you. Now, what if your business struggle and you fall to a lower category? Yeah, that's called downgrade, downward graduation. Yes, what will happen if suppose your business struggle and you fall to a lower category? You don't just plummet. The government give you the parachute. What the government give you? The government give you the parachute. Your current higher status continue to glide you safely until this very end of the current financial year. You only land in your new lower status, and it is and it associated benefit on April 1st of the subsequent financial year. Yes, that's called parachute. Immediately you do not lose all those benefits. So you land to the lower to the next to the lower um, status on April 1st of the subsequent financial year. So VIP launch for going up one full year, and parachute for going down glides to April 1st. Write that on your scratch pad and you will never miss the reclassification question. Finally, what we have to talk about the risk. Yes, we have to talk about the risk. So basically, the RBI Systemic Risk Survey paints a very clear picture of what keeps central banker up at the night. While most risks are sitting in the medium category, yeah, most risk, where are they sitting? They are sitting in the medium risk category. Okay, global and institutional threats are rising, and you know the most vulnerable part, our export reliant manufacturing. Yes, this is the most vulnerable part, so called export reliant manufacturing. Right, think about textile and electronics, and the shipping and logistics sector. They are taking the brunt of the global supply chain disruption, geopolitical tension, and tariff. And domestically, the higher institutional threat rapidly climbing the chart is the cyber risk. Cyber risk remain high and is perceived to be global growing rapidly. That's called, high institutional risk. Okay. So what we have discussed, let log this in before your cup is empty. Here are the punchy key takeaway what we have discussed so far. So we talked about the MSME giant. I told you over 633 lakh. How much, sir? 633 lakh. As you can see, almost 633 lakh units, creating 11.10 crore job, and massive 99% of these are micro units. I told you. Then we talk about the PSL golden ticket. Udyam registration make loan PSL eligible, including TRDS transaction. KBI loan hit the 7.5% micro sub target, right? So Udyam registration we have just talked about. And then I told you that upward and downward. Upward is the VIP launch, downward is the parachute. So VIP launch keep present status for 1 year after the registration year close. That's called upward. And downward means keep the present status until the financial year end. New status apply after April 1st. And I told you about RBI risk radar. Export manufacturing and shipping are highly vulnerable. Right, two words, please remember this: export manufacturing. And second thing I told you is about the shipping. Yeah, these are highly vulnerable sectors. Okay, and cyber risk is the top growing institutional threat. So keep the VIP launch and parachute in your mind. Trust the preparation you have put in, and you are going to absolutely crush the paper. Now, friends, have a look at the next slide. So friends, when you read the textbook, it just look like a wall of percentage. It is easy for your eye to glaze over. But today we are going to pull those number of the page. We are not going to look at them as a random statistics. We are going to look at them as an actual heartbeat of the Indian economy. Let's set the stage for the first, that's called MSME. Friends, MSME are not just side hustle. They are an absolute powerhouse. They require very little capital to start. They don't rely heavily on foreign import, and they naturally build indigenous technology. Because they can pop up anywhere, they drive balanced growth across both rural as well as the urban India, right? So how big is this engine really? Here is your forever memory hack for the examination. To lock down these scattered demographic and economic statistics, you don't need to memorize the textbook. You just need to visualize the 321 dashboard. So when you sit down for the paper, write 321, and here it where what it unlock. 3 stands for, as you can see here, 3 stands for 30% and 3 is to 1, right? So what is the meaning of 30%? So MSME consistently produce 30% of the India's entire GDP as well as the GVA. And what about 3 is to 1? Yes, if you talk about the 3 is to 1, so that is your gender demographic. 3 is to 1 is the gender demographic, which means that the workforce is roughly 3 is to 1 male to female. As you can see, they have mentioned 76% of the workforce is male and 24% is female, roughly. So 3 is to 1 male to female. I hope this is clear. So whenever you see 3 stands for these two data, 30% and then 3 is to 1. Now friends, 2 stands for 20 crore. As you can see, they have mentioned here 20 crore. So as of mid 2024, this sector has generated a massive 20 crore job nationwide, massive 20 crore job nationwide. And one stands for the absolute king, the micro sector. Never forget who is actually doing the heavy lifting. Micro unit alone generate a staggering 97% of these jobs. You can see they have easily clearly mentioned that micro units generate 97% of this job, right? Small and medium unit combinedly contribute barely 3%, right? If you combine a small and medium unit combinedly, they contribute barely 3%. Because they are the king, micro unit also command almost half of the MSME bank credit. So 49% share of the total MSME credit is through the micro unit. So that is your 3 to 1 dashboard. It answer almost every demographic question that they can throw. Now, if you talk about the credit, so let's talk about the bank. Right now, bank credit to MSME is outperforming credit expansion in other primary sector, right? So it is outperforming the credit expansion in other primary sector. So some data have been provided, but wait, are not a small business risky? They used to be, but look at the asset quality. So as you can see, the gross NPA figure they have mentioned here, that the gross NPA figure fell significantly. It has dropped beautifully from 4.5% in the early 2024 to 3.6% by the early 2025. How did they pull that off? Through massive government safety net. So there are some schemes like CGFMU, ECLGS, pumped in over 6.2 lakh crore in secure government guaranteed credit, which kept those bad loans impressively low. Finally, how does the government supercharge this sector? So they use the cluster strategy. That's called cluster development. Imagine trying to build a modern tech business isolated in the middle of nowhere. It is tough. So the government grouped these business together into industrial cluster. What government did, it grouped this together into industrial cluster, right? So by putting them side by side, it streamlined their access to technical help, improve quality standard. See the keyword they have mentioned, streamlining access to specialized technical assistant, industrial support, right? And then create collaborative competition. The keyword is collaborative competition. When you put a bunch of hungry entrepreneur in the same room, innovation accelerate naturally. So let's log this in before. So here's your punchy key takeaway from this particular slide. The first thing we had talked about the 3 to 1 dashboard. I told you 3 stand for 30% of the Indian GDP, and 3 is to 1 means 76% to 24% male female gender split. Then we talk about the 20 crore total job created. Then we talk about one absolute king, and who is that? Micro unit create 97% of the job and take 49% of the credit. So micro unit is the absolute king of this 20 foot 99% of the job, and 49% of the credit has been taken by the, you can see, 49% share of the micro taken by the micro. And then credit is booming. MSME credit growth is beating other sector. NPA are shrinking. So gross NPA earlier was 4.5% and it fell to 3.6%, largely saved by over 6.2 lakh crore from CGMFU and ECLGS, and then grouping business geographically to share technology, cut cost, and foster collaborative competition. So keep that 3 to 1 dashboard in your mind. Trust the work you have put in, and you are going to have a nice paper of the MSME. Now, friends, let's talk more about the time machine, right? So, in the year back to 1991, before 1991, Indian small scale industry were like plant living in protected greenhouse. So they were just like plant living in protected greenhouse. They grew fast because they were shielded from the outside weather. Yes, they grew very fast because they were shielded from the outside weather. But then in the 1991 economic reform smashed the greenhouse gas. Tariff drop. So 1991 reform, reduced tariff, smashed the greenhouse, and foreign direct investment flowed in, and suddenly our local MSME were standing in the middle of the fierce global storm, right? So our local MSME were standing in the middle of fierce global storm. Today the reality is ruthless. You either aggressively cut costs, upgrade and integrate into global value chain, upgrade and integrate into GVC, right? Meaning you supply part to the big global player, or you face extinction. Yeah, this is the current reality. You either aggressively cut cost, upgrade and integrate into global value chain, right? or you face extinction. So how do we survive? We look at the gold standard, so called Germany. Yeah, MSME Germany MSME sector is a famous worldwide, and it is called, middle island. What we call it, mid island. Why are they so successful? Because they build a bridge between the classroom and the factory. See, on one side we have classroom, other side we have factory, and the bridge has been built by these German mid island. So, their secret is the government backed handshake between academia and the industry. Government backed integration. Students get out of their chair and get hand on technical expertise on the factory floor. And in return, the business get fresh lean manufacturing idea. So it is ultimate win-win for both of them. Right. Now, how do Indian business emulate that German? So, how do the Indian business emulate that German success? They have to master the 7M framework, so called 7 pillars. Here is your forever memory hack for the exam. Don't try to memorize 7 random words starting with M. Instead, visualize the chronological factory floor. Imagine that you are building a business from absolute scratch today. Yeah, you are building a business from absolute scratch. So what order do things happen in? First of all, you need money, that's called capital. Okay, then you use that money to buy material. You use that money to buy material, so called raw good. You load those goods into the machinery, that's called equipment. You hire manpower, that is worker, to operate it. And you need good management to run the shift. You sell the final product to the market. And what keeps you pushing through the hard time? That's motivation, isn't it? So the link is something like this. First come money, then come material, then come machinery, then come manpower, then come management, then come market, and finally it's motivation. See, it is not just a list, it is a chronological story, right? You will never forget it. But let's zoom into with step number one, because it is the biggest bottleneck of all, so called the money. Without finance, the MSME engine chokes. The core issue is that these business usually lack collateral and the credit history. They have poor credit history, they lack collateral, right? Because strict bank norms lock them out. They are pushed into the arms of informal local lender with crushing interest rate. Yeah, informal local lender with crushing with very high interest rate, right? And add in poor financial literacy and severe cash flow disruption, like late payment from big buyer, and they are fighting for air. So what is the rescue boat? Yes, government scheme like CGT, MSc and Mudra. These are the absolute game changer, because they provide crucial collateral free funding. And today they are backed by modern alternative finance like venture capital, P2P lending, crowdfunding, supply chain finance. So let's lock in this in your memory. So first of all, we talked about the 1991 reality check. The greenhouse gas broke, glass broke, MSME must cut cost and join global value chain or face extension. Then we talk about the German Mittelstand, Mittelstand model. So the ultimate success story driven by fusing academia with industry, that is fusing a student with the lean manufacturing. Then we talk about the chronological 7M framework, money by material for machinery, money by material for machinery, you know, run by manpower, overseen by management, sold to the market, fueled by motivation. And then we talk about the money bottleneck. Lack of collateral pushes MSME to informal lender. Cash flow is ruined by delayed payment. And then we talk about the financial rescue. That means CGTMAC and Mudra steps in to provide the holy grail, collateral free formal credit. I hope this is crystal clear. Now, friends, so basically, we are talking about the manpower. That's called human resource. So how do they stay alive? These business are fighting a three front war. They can't afford the best employee. They can't afford the best equipment, and their raw material costs are constantly fluctuating. How do they stay alive? So here is your forever memory hack for the exam. To remember the problem and the exact solution for these three, I want you to visualize the underdog kitchen. The underdog kitchen. Imagine you are opening a restaurant, but you are competing against a massive five-star corporate hotel across the street. First comes, manpower. You can't afford to pay corporate salary scale, so you can't hire the five-star executive chef. This is called, skill gap. This is called skill gap. Okay. If you hire them, they leave the second the hotel offered them more money. That's called retention issue. So what is the solution? You hire passionate local and train them yourself through the OJT. That's called on the job training, right? You partner with local culinary school like public private partnership. Yeah, you partner with an PPP model to build a pipeline of talent, and to keep them from leaving to the corporate hotel, you give them what the hotel want: flexible work hour, right? Flexible work hour as well as performance bonus. Then comes the machinery. Manpower, I think it's so. This is called PPP model, OGT, and retention strategy. Then comes the machinery. To bake at scale, you need a $1 lakh smart. I think it is, yeah, $1 lakh smart oven. So that is the massive capex, or we call it, capital expenditure. Because MSME lack that upfront cash, they are forced to use obsolete low yield oven. Yeah, they are forced to use the obsolete oven, or also we call it, low yield oven. Their tech literacy is low, and maintaining old equipment is so expensive. So what is the solution? Don't buy the oven, lease it. Leasing protect your precious working capital. Or you tap into government help like TUFS. Have you heard of the TUFS? Yeah, that's called, technological updation fund scheme. Yeah, that's the government help. Finally, you can perform a joint venture with a tech developer to get modern gear at reduced rate. Joint venture with a technological developer. Third comes, material, or fourth material, so-called ingredient. Your restaurant lives and dies by its ingredient. If the price of tomorrow, or suppose if the price of tomatoes suddenly, triples, that's called price volatility. Your profit margin is wiped out. If you only buy from one single farmer and his truck break down, that's called, supplier concentration. That's called what? That's called the supplier concentration. So what you did, suppose if you buy one from one single farmer and his truck break down, right? You have nothing to cook, and if he give you rotten vegetable, that's called, quality discrepancy. If he give you rotten vegetable, right? You have nothing to cook, so your customer will never come back. What is the solution? Diversify. Yeah, the diversification is one solution. As you can see, they have mentioned vendor diversification, which means, you know that never rely on one vendor. Lock into your price where you can, and ruthless protect your incoming quality, because your raw material dictate your reputation. So whenever you get a question on these three pillars, just close your eye, walk into the underdog kitchen, and the answer will right there waiting for you. So, friends, let's lock in before the concept. So, we talked about the manpower. What is the manpower? So, HR. MSME lose talent to corporate salaries. Solution is the PVV model, on the job training, PVV model for cheap course, on the job training, and flexible work bonus to curb attrition. So, this is called, the problem of attrition. Just one word, attrition. Then comes, machinery. Machinery means technology. High capex forces MSME to use obsolete, inefficient technology. So what is the solution? Use the TUFS. We use the TUFS. That's called Technology Upgradation Fund Scheme for government support. Lease asset instead of buying. Form technical alliance. Right. So we should lease the asset. We should not buy the asset. Rather, we should lease the asset. Leasing one good thing. And then comes, materials. I told you that margins are dictated by raw supply. Raw supply always dictate the operating margin. So price volatility, excuses the margin. Supplier concentration, that means relying on a single vendor, create massive supply chain risk. Inferior quality ruin the market trust. Keep the underdog teacher kitchen in your mind. Trust your preparation. Now, friends, let's talk more about the fifth pillar we have. Let's start with the material. Just now we're talking about. I told you, if you want to secure in the last slide, we talked about how raw material prices fluctuate. I told you, na, that raw material prices keep fluctuating, and how relying on one supplier can ruin you. So how does a tiny business fight back against massive market force? They team up. Yeah, what they do, they team up, and they build, you know so basically they team up, and they get strict. If you want to secure cheap raw material, you can't buy small. You have to buy in bulk, right? You have to buy in what, bulk. But a micro enterprise does not have the cash for that. So what they do, they form the procurement consortium, a group of small business banding together to buy massive quantities and unlock huge volume discount, right? So next, they stop putting all their egg in one basket through vendor diversification. That means they're verifying multiple supplier, so you are never held hostage if one goes out of the business. And they also lock down the quality control, so-called QC, at the door, refusing inferior input before they ruin the final product. And when cash is tight, they tap into something called raw material assistance scheme, right? So, like the NSIC, which act like a government-backed credit line just for domestic and imported supply. Now let's talk about the final and the most dangerous bottleneck of all, so-called management. The absolute biggest threat to an MSME is not the lack of money. So the absolute biggest threat to MSME is not a lack of money. It is a called single proprietor fatigue. Yeah, this is the word that they use, single proprietor fatigue. Imagine an owner trying to do all the taxes, sweep the floor, negotiate with the vendor, plan a 5 year strategy all on a Tuesday afternoon. It all lead to catastrophic burnout because they lack formal training in the strategy or tax compliance, and because they never plan for who will take over the business next. That's called succession planning. They never plan for this succession planning. The business hit a ceiling, it just cannot break through, right? That is one major issue. So here is your forever memory hack. So friends, let's log this in our memory. So we talked about the material survival. So we talk about the proposal, procurement consortium, right? Like grouping up for bulk discount. Then we talk about the diversification and quality control, multiple vendors and strict quality check, and then government aid. So government aid, that NSIC raw material assistance scheme for supplier credit. Then also we talked about the management bottleneck. The main problem is that single proprietor fatigue, excessive burnout, and lack of successive planning. And the solution is, MSME DI training, hiring a specialist, and effective delegation. Stop planning playing the instrument and start conducting the orchestra. So that is all. Now the fifth, sixth, and seventh. Let's cover these three. So friends, let's look at the market side first. So a small business can make the most incredible product in the world, but if they are stuck selling only within a 5 kilometer radius, they are playing a losing game, right? So suppose they are stuck selling within a 5 kilometer radius, they are playing a losing game. So they lack brand recognition. They get crushing by big corporate player with massive advertising budget, isn't it? Intense competition from well-resourced large global firms. So how do they bridge that gap without spending millions? They leverage, digital channel. They list on e-commerce platform like Amazon or Flipkart to get nationwide reach instantly. They use low-cost digital tool, right, like social media and local SEO. These are the low cost digital tool. They attend B2B trade fair to network, and they take advantage of the NSIC marketing scheme designed specifically to help MSMEs showcase their goods domestically and internationally. These are the solution: cost effective digital marketing, networking via trade fair, e-commerce integration, scheme for domestic and foreign marketing. Now let's talk about the final pillar and honestly the soul of the business, that is called motivation. Running a micro enterprise is exhausting because budget are tight, salaries and benefit are often low, which can leave employee feeling unappreciated. On the top of that, the business owner face immense stress, isolation, and burnout from carrying the entire weight of the enterprise on their shoulder. So this is your memory hack for examination to lock into final two concepts. So I want you to visualize the megaphone and the spark. So, megaphone, imagine an artisan. Let's suppose an artisan, right, standing in a tiny alley. Nobody can hear them over the noise of the main road. So, megaphone is what amplify their voice to the world. So, they utilize the megaphone to amplify their voice to the world. Okay. E-commerce like Amazon, Flipkart, and NSIC scheme are that megaphone. Yes. So these Amazon, these NSIC are those megaphone. They let a tiny shop shout across the entire country so buyer everywhere can hear them. And motivation, right? Every fire need oxygen to keep burning. Money is part of it, but when budget are tight, you keep the spark alive through human connection. For worker, it is low cost, high impact recognition like employee of the month and a supportive culture. For the owner, it is a peer network and industry forum, a community where they can talk to each other, founder, recharge, and get mentorship so that they don't burn out. So I hope this is crystal clear. So remember the megaphone for getting heard in the market and a spark for keeping the team and honor driven. This solution will flow naturally on your scratch pad. So now let's log these two concepts in our memory forever. So we talked about the market bottleneck like a limited geographical reach, poor brand trust, heavy global competition, and solution I told you e-commerce onboarding, low cost digital marketing, and finally trade fair and NSIC marketing, right? And then we talked about the motivation bottleneck like the spark, so employee demotivation due to budget constraint, honor burnout and stress. And solution also we discussed like recognition problem, positive work culture, joining founder peer network for resilience and mentorship. So I hope that's crystal clear, and that is all we need to learn from the chapter number 1 of the MSME. I hope everything is crystal clear. Meet you in the next session. Thank you. Have a very nice day.